Mark chapter 11. For those of you that are new, we've been in a season in the Gospel of Mark. It's called Eyewitness. The irony of the sermon season title is, though it is eyewitness, and it is a collection of the eyewitness accounts, mainly by Peter and others, put together by John Mark, the irony is this: they were eyewitnesses and completely missed it. Every week we are here where they are eyewitnesses to the life of Jesus, and even in eyewitness accounts of the life of Jesus, they completely miss what is right in front of them. And today is no different. But in order to experience today, we've all got to do something in the room for just the next 15 minutes. And we did this during a season we called Welcome to Babylon, where we journeyed as Jews into captivity. We're all going to be first century Jews this morning, okay? You didn't know what you're showing up for, but now you are. You are now Jewish, right? No barbecue after church today, all right? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to be Jews, and we're going to enter into this journey. Are you ready? Come on, 11. This is our last time together all summer. Are you ready? Okay, let's journey together. Here's where we're at. We are in Jericho. As you remember last week, Jesus was in Jericho, headed to Jerusalem for death, burial, resurrection. Jericho was 18 miles from Jerusalem. So we're 18 miles out, okay? We're 18 miles from where we're trying to go. Jericho is the lowest city in the world. It is 800 feet below sea level. Jerusalem is 3,000 feet above sea level. The Mount of Olives in Jerusalem is another several thousand feet up. So over the course of 18 miles from Jericho to the temple, we are going to travel several thousand feet above sea level. We're going to climb basically half of a mountain, 7,000 to 8,000 feet. Someone told me Pikes Peak, I think, is 14,000 feet. So in 18 miles, we are going straight up to the top, okay? This is a major hike for us. Are you ready for a hike? Okay, a couple things that we need to know. Number one, it is a desert dry climate. So it's incredibly hot. It is an exhausting hike. It is very, very difficult for us to do. So we know what is ahead of us, and it is the difficulty of the journey ahead of us that gives us the appreciation for what we're about to accomplish, right? This is where the Psalms of Ascent come from. Psalm 120 to 134, it's the Psalms of Ascent. It is what the children of Israel would sing when they hit Jericho and they're journeying up the Mount of Olives, and they're taking this incredibly difficult 18-mile hike straight uphill to the temple, and they're singing to themselves and they're declaring what they expect God to do. That's what we're doing, right? We're doing it, right? We're taking the hike. We're headed up. Another thing about this is the beauty of reaching the temple is the journey that it takes to get there. Who in here? It's the moment. We're in it and we're walking. I mean, who's done a 5K before? 5K? Come on, 5K. Okay, 5K. Now let's kick it up a notch. Where are my half marathon people? Half marathon. Come on. Okay. Is there any, now I'll tell you, 9:30 at a couple, are there any full marathon people in the room? Come on, full marathon, let me see. All right, we got some full marathon people in the room. Good for you. None of us can. No. Here's the thing. I've talked with friends. I had one in first service who has done a marathon, and you get to mile 19 and you feel like you're going to die. You get to 22 and you might be dying, right? And then you get to 26.2, and the accomplishment of doing that takes over the pain and the agony and the difficulty and sends you into this emotional adrenaline of like, I actually did it. That's where we're headed, right? We are headed to the Mount of Olives, to the top of the Mount of Olives, 18 miles uphill. To add to it is the excitement. Added to the excitement of this was the Jewish pilgrimage. This was where they journeyed to experience the presence of God. This is where they sacrificed daily. This is the space where hope was. This is the space where forgiveness was, where they would lay their burnt offering or their blood offering on the altar and they would feel the presence of God cleanse them from their sins. This was the space. And so they're excited about getting to this space. There is this journey of anticipation. There is this excitement of arrival. And then there's one last thing that we all know is coming. Jesus is with us. Here we are, family. We're taking the trek up the mountain, and we are excited about this because we've done this journey, and we know when we get there that great things are going to happen. But we also have the Jesus is with us, which means when we get there, Jesus is going to be the king. And when he is the king, he's going to sit on the throne of his castle. And when he sits on the throne of his castle, he is going to rule the nations and overtake Rome. And I'll be on his right and you'll be on his left. And we'll get to the top and we'll be in charge. If you're new, that's not theology, that's heresy. But that's what we believe right now. That's what the disciples are thinking. That's what's running through their mind as they are journeying to the top of the mountain. They are going to this space, and they've done this journey before, and they can envision in their hearts what God is going to do. And the difficulty of it is going to make the reward so much sweeter. And it's a journey that's been done throughout their history, but there's something different about this journey. This journey, we've got the King with us, and it's kingdom time. It's time to see Jesus take over. Can you feel this? Can you feel this? I was in New York a long time ago working on a project, and part of that project, there was the group that was over the project that was there, and I was there, and there was a couple of us, and they said, is there anything you want to do while you're in New York? And I was like, you miss 100% of the shots you never shoot, right? I'll shoot my shot. I said, yeah, I want to go to a Yankees game. I threw it out there. They were in the playoffs against the Texas Rangers, ironically enough, at this time. And the guy said, cool, you go to a Yankees game? We can make that happen. I was like, really? Like, I was not expecting that. He's like, yeah, we'll send you to a Yankees game. You want to go Friday night or Saturday night? I was like, as quick as possible. Let's go. And he said, okay, I'll get you a Yankees ticket, but I need you to do one thing. I said, sure. Name it, I'm in. He said, I need you to take the subway to the game, not the taxi. And he was like, if you don't take the subway to Yankee Stadium, you don't experience it. What I didn't know was the subway was a much longer, much more difficult route than to just grab a cab and take a cab. So I'm like, okay, fine, I'll take the subway. I get down into the subway, and it is mass chaos. There are thousands of Yankees fans everywhere. They're all wearing Yankees gear. They're screaming cuss words at Texas Ranger fans. They're telling, like, I got down there and I'm looking around. I just remember like it was yesterday. And they're telling these Rangers fans, oh, you want to go to the game? Yeah, you take the J train. The J train takes you to the game. And I'm like, okay, I guess we take the J train. And this guy goes, no, bro, you Yankees, come on. We take the D train to the stadium. We're sending them to Manhattan, right? Like just send them, right? They're going. And so he pulls me in, and he's big brothering me, and I'm like, this guy's either going to rob me and kill me, or he's actually going to get me to the stadium. And we get on this train, and I mean, it is so packed. There is nowhere to sit, and I'm standing there with all these people, and we're riding, and we get there, and we get off this train, and we hop on this other train, and this train takes us, and then we get there, and he's like, bro, can you smell it? Can you smell it? We're here, man, we're here. And you walk out of the subway, and this was the first year they had built their brand new stadium, and you literally, you make the climb, right? You climb out of the subway, and you encounter what looks like the Roman Colosseum. I mean, it is the most opulent outside of a stadium. You got these statues of Yankee greats. You got every year that they won the World Series up there, and it's lit up and it's beautiful. You've got these hot dog vendors that are outside of the stadium, and they're serving you hot dogs and all of that. And I got into the game, and this was the game where the Texas Rangers in the first inning scored like 7 runs. Just total terrible game. The Yankees got absolutely destroyed, and it was incredible. You know why it was incredible? It was incredible because of the journey. I'll never forget the journey. I don't even remember after the first inning of the game, but I remember the subway. I remember the hot dogs outside of the stadium. I remember them sending Rangers fans all over New York, and I remember them pulling me onto the subway and chanting on the subway, and it was the journey that made the experience. That's why we have to enter into this right now, because it would be really easy for me to say to you, Jesus is the King, and the temple is your heart, and he has all authority on heaven and earth. That's a really cute 3-point sermon, add a poem in there, and we're on our way. But if you don't enter into it, you can't feel it. If you're not on the journey, you don't get the experience. So see yourself right now. We are climbing 18 miles straight uphill. It is sweaty. It is hot. We're exhausted. We're singing the Psalms of Ascent. We've got Jesus with us. We walk into the temple, and in our minds, it's kingdom time. We're taking over, baby. I'm on your right. He's on your left. Let's take over Rome. We've made it. The rest of Mark 11 through the first part of 12 plays out in 3 scenes. What are the 3 scenes we have to have for a hostile kingdom takeover? Number 1, you got to have a king. We got to have a new king. So we have a new king, scene 1. Scene 2, king's got to have a castle. You've got to have your place where you are ruling from as a king. So you got to have a new king. You got to have a castle. And that king has to have the authority. All heads are off the Romans. He's got to be able to call the shots. Watch this. Watch the inversion of the kingdom. Watch Jesus take what they are expecting on a journey and turn it into the gospel. Let's go. Number 1, scene 1 is the king. Got to have a king, right? So they've arrived. They arrive in Jerusalem. And when they arrive in Jerusalem, Jesus tells his disciples to go before him and get me a colt. If they ask you why, tell them the Lord has need of it. So they go, they get this colt, they bring it back to Jesus. And here we are, Mark 11, 7 through 11. Then they brought the colt to Jesus and threw their garments over it, and he sat on it. This is a kingly procession in the making. They're like, no, you will not sit on this ant. We will take our garments off and honor you, and out of respect for you, we will place our garments. It gets even better. Verse 8, many in the crowd spread their garments on the road ahead of him, and others spread leafy branches they cut in the fields. Jesus was in the center of the procession, and the people all around him were shouting, praise God. Blessings on the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessings on, this is so interesting, the coming kingdom of our ancestor David. Praise God in highest heaven. So Jesus, watch what he does. This is the entry of a king. They've laid their garments on the ground. They've covered. This is Aladdin entering into a babwa, right? Like this is like the biggest procession you can imagine laid out for Jesus. They're all screaming and shouting, praise God. David's kingdom is finally coming, right? And they're excited about it. And Jesus walks in, and here's his reaction, verse 11. This is awesome. So Jesus came into Jerusalem and went into the temple. After looking around carefully at everything, he left because it was late in the afternoon. Then he returned to Bethany, a neighboring town, with the 12 disciples. Interesting, right? They lay out this entire grand procession of like, here he is, the king, and the king is coming to his throne. And Jesus just walks in, kind of laid out. Let's go to Bethany and grab a hotel. They're like, what? What is going on right now? Like, this is the home that David dreamed of, that Solomon built, that is now yours. Like, you are the king, and we laid out the procession for you, and here we are. So Jesus says nothing. He carefully evaluates the circus that is happening around him, and then he leaves to Bethany. He wakes up in the morning, headed back to Jerusalem, and look at what happens. Mark 11 verses, wait. No, first, okay, so there's a transition that happens here. He heads back to Bethany. As he heads back to Bethany, he does something deeply rooted in Jewish history, okay? So Jeremiah gives this prophecy. And this prophecy is about God giving the people of Israel everything that they wanted. And in the midst of that prophecy of giving them everything that they wanted, they totally missed him. And when they totally missed him, he says, you guys are like a fig tree that has no figs. Because of that, you are cursed. Now, let's look at it from Jesus' perspective. Mark 11, 12 through 14. The next morning, as they were leaving Bethany, remember, Jesus walked into the temple, he looked around, he left, went to Bethany, they've woken up, they're headed back. Jesus was hungry. Verse 13, he noticed a fig tree in full leaf a little way off. So he went over to see if he could find any figs, but there were only leaves because it was too early in the season for fruit. Verse 14, then Jesus said to the tree, may no one ever eat of your fruit again. And the disciples heard him say it. Jeremiah chapter 8, God says to the nation of Israel that has totally rebelled against him, that will not follow him, and he's been begging them through the prophet Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, to come back to me, come back to me. Jeremiah chapter 8, God speaks to Jeremiah and says, tell these people, I gave them everything that they wanted. I gave them water, I gave them trees, I gave them fruit, I gave them shelter, and they have completely ignored me. So I will curse their fig trees, and they will bear no more figs. Jeremiah 8 verse 13 is the conclusion of this prophecy. I will surely consume them. There will be no harvest of figs and grapes. Their fruit trees will all die. Whatever I gave them will soon be gone. I, the Lord, have spoken. Mark 11, 20 through 21, Peter now understands what Jesus did. Jesus is walking back to the temple and he looks at a fig tree and he says, curse you, you will never bring figs again. And they immediately go back to that space of, uh-oh, this is not good. Jeremiah talked about this, Mark 11, 20 through 21. The next morning, as they passed by the fig tree he had cursed, the disciples noticed it had withered from the roots up. Peter remembered what Jesus had said to the tree on the previous day and exclaimed, look, Rabbi, the fig tree you cursed has withered and died. Here is Jesus' message. All these shenanigans about the arrival of a king, and you still have no figs. You have celebrated this massive arrival of a king, but you still don't see me. You still are just like cursed fig trees that are bearing no fruit. In other words, our perception of Jesus must match who Jesus really is, or we're still blind. This is the message over and over and over. If you've been with us for the past 5 weeks, it makes no surprise here that he's bringing them back to a prophecy of Jeremiah, and he is saying, you still don't get it. You still think I am this earthly king who is going to enter into Jerusalem and sit atop the throne of a castle and rule with all authority. And what you're not seeing is it's the same thing you did before when you had no king. Before in Jeremiah 8, when you had no king, you lived for yourselves, you did what you wanted, and God was great when he did what you wanted him to do for you. But when God tried to get you to submit, you totally missed him. It's the same message. The message for all of us over the past 5 weeks should be this. It is possible for us to be in here every single week, to be worshiping, to be in a group, to be serving, to give money, and still miss the real Jesus that is right in front of our face. It's possible. How is it not? These guys walked with him. They watched him. We dreamed about the journey 18 miles uphill. They walked it. They experienced it. And yet Jesus is saying, you're not following me. I have some family that was in town, and they were wanting to follow me, which, look, so here's the thing. The Lord's still working on me, right? I'm not the best guy to follow. My idea of you following me is, it's not my job to babysit you. It's your job to keep up. Like, if you're going to follow me, let's go. I mean, you have smartphones with GPS on them. You know how older people are like, no, I don't want to use the GPS. I just want to follow you. I'm like, plug it in. It's going to show you where to go. It's going to tell you, I don't mess with all that. I'm going to follow you. So here I am. I'm just cruising, right? And I get to the restaurant, and I get out at the restaurant, and we walk up to the door, and we're waiting. I'm looking at Anna, and I'm like, where are they? And she's like, I don't know. I thought they, I don't know what happened. I'm just like, I don't know either. So we wait about 10 minutes, and I said, call them. Find out if they're here. And so she calls, and when she called, she said, hey, are you guys at the restaurant? I'm like, no, we're following you. And I said, what? Asking. They said, yeah, we're still on 45 following your white Dodge. I was like, no, you are not. We are at the restaurant. You guys have followed the wrong vehicle halfway to Houston while we've been waiting on you, right? It's possible, and it's possible for us too. This is what we have to wrap our mind around. This was the message of the king. Jesus said, you have the wrong king. As if that wasn't enough, scene 2 makes it crystal clear. What does a king have to have? A castle. Right? So here we are, Mark 11, 15 through 19. When they arrived back in Jerusalem, Jesus entered the temple and began to drive out the people buying and selling animals for sacrifices. He knocked over the tables of the money changers and the chairs of those selling doves, and he stopped everyone from using the temple as a marketplace. He said to them, the scriptures declare, my temple will be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have turned it into a den of thieves. Verse 18, when the leading priests and teachers of religious law heard what Jesus had done, they began planning how to kill him. But they were afraid of him because the people were so amazed at his teaching. Verse 19, that evening, Jesus and the disciples left the city. A very common teaching, and it's not wrong. It's a very clear teaching on this passage is Jesus got fed up with the blindness or the misdirection or the chaos that was happening at the temple, so he ran them all out. It's their blindness, right? But there's a deeper meaning that is taking place here. N.T. Wright nails it when he talks about the temple history. So remember this, the temple was the place that God established his presence so all people could come and experience him. Listen to what N.T. Wright says. The way Jesus' contemporaries had organized the temple, it had come to symbolize not God's welcoming of nations, but God's exclusion of them. He continues on. Those bent on violent rebellion against Rome looked at the temple as the central focus of their ideology. Their militia was rallying, and they were saying, we don't want those Romans or those Gentiles in our temple. They're going to submit to us, and this will become the place where the new king comes, and he sits on his throne, and when he sits on his throne, he overthrows Rome so that we can rule with power. They were looking at it as this space of their rebellious political overthrow. That is what the temple had come to mean. It was supposed to be a place of sacrifice, but it has become a place of religious and political rebellion. So we have to go back to the sacrificial system. This is the reason why the temple existed, so that you could take the journey from Jericho up to Jerusalem and you could buy, and this was very common practice. So this was not a new thing that started happening at the temple. Imagine us taking that journey with an animal that we're trying to take 18 miles up a desert, up a mountain to the temple. It was incredibly difficult. The animal may die. So one of the things that they did was they would journey with money. They would get there outside of the temple. They would buy an offering that was a perfect animal, and they would go in and sacrifice. This was common practice, okay? So what Jesus is doing is Jesus is entering into the temple, and he is absolutely shutting it down, not because of what it's become, but because its need to exist is no longer relevant. In other words, they were looking for a king to come sit on a throne inside of the temple to rule Rome. What they got was a king who destroyed the temple and wants to sit on the throne of your hearts. That's what Jesus is doing. It's the inversion of the kingdom. Talked about the selfish answer is, give us a king to rule inside of the castle, to overthrow everyone and fix all of our problems. The sacrificial resolution was, I'm destroying this place. There's no longer relevance to it. The throne I want to sit on is the throne of your heart. Jesus says it, Mark 13, 1 through 2. As Jesus was leaving the temple that day, one of his disciples said, "Teacher, look at these magnificent buildings. Look at the impressive stones in the walls." Jesus replied, "Yes, look at these great buildings, but they will be completely demolished. Not one stone will be left on top of another." John 2:19, John gives us Jesus saying the exact same thing. "All right," Jesus replied, "destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." The next verse says, the disciples did not understand what he was saying. In other words, they expected a king to rule from the temple. Jesus came to destroy the temple and rule our own hearts. Now, here's the thing. I'll say it. Why not? It's summertime. If you want someone to come and rule from a castle to fix all of your problems, Jesus is bad news for you. Jesus is bad news for you. If you want someone to come destroy the temple and rule from your heart and transform you and fix you so that you can become a person of sacrificial love, then Jesus is great news. We may even call that gospel. You're saying, "Oh, yeah, but I mean, who doesn't want that?" I don't know. There are a lot of people that want somebody in November to enter into a building and fix all of our problems. I think Jesus would walk in and set fire to that building. I don't want to say it. I may get in trouble, but I think he'd set fire to that building and say, "That's not my temple. You know what is my temple? You. You are my temple. You are the place I'm going to rule from. You are the one I'm going to transform. I did not come to fix all of your problems. I came to fix you. I didn't come to fix everything going on to protect your comforts and luxuries. I came to fix you, and you will become by way of me making my tabernacle in your heart." John 1:14, he came and tabernacled within them. He came to live in us. What is the message? They had the wrong king. They expected a ruler to overthrow Rome. He came not to overthrow Rome, but to overthrow us. We wanted a king to sit in the castle and rule from the castle. He said, "I don't need the temple. I need you. You are what I need. Forget the buildings. These buildings look magnificent. Great. Not a stone will be left because I'm coming for you." Okay, it's time to wrap it up. We have the wrong king. We have the wrong castle. What is the last thing left? You've got the king, you've got the castle. Who's got the authority? Who's got the authority to call the shots? So Jesus, by this point, has completely spoiled this mountain climb, and they asked, the religious rulers and political authorities of the day asked the very question we just asked. Mark 11, 27 through 28. Again, they entered Jerusalem. As Jesus was walking through the temple area, the leading priests, the teachers of religious law, and the elders came up to him. Verse 28, they demanded, "By what authority Who do you think you are? By what authority are you doing all these things? Who gave you the right to do them? He answers them with a question based on John's baptism. That question catches them in a space where they cannot answer whether it was heaven or earth or who John was, because it's going to put them in a compromising situation. So now they're stuck. And as they're stuck, Mark chapter 12, Jesus begins to teach them by way of story. Watch the brilliance in Jesus. Then Jesus began teaching them with stories. A man planted a vineyard. Does that call you back to the garden in Genesis 1? He built a wall around it, dug a pit for pressing out the grape juice, and built a lookout tower. Then he leased the vineyard to tenant farmers and moved to another country. Here's the first part of the story. God has prepared a perfect place for you. He has always done this, from the garden to the tent to the tabernacle to the temple to the rebuilt temple that you're standing in right now. God has always created a place for his presence to dwell among his people so that you can experience him. He's saying this man created this farm, and it's the perfect farm, and it's ready for you. But when he comes to get his fair share, what happens? Mark 12, 2-5. At the time of the grape harvest, he sent one of his servants to collect his fair share of the crop. But the farmers grabbed the servant, beat him up, and sent him back empty-handed. You take your pick. Jeremiah, Nehemiah, Ezra, the prophets of old. They would come, they would say, you need to be following God, and they just would resist it. Again, verse 4. The owner then sent another servant, but they insulted him and beat him over the head. Verse 5, the next servant he sent was killed. Others were sent and either beaten or killed. Mark 12, 6-8, here is the story. This is what unlocks the whole thing. Until there was only one left, his son whom he loved dearly. The owner finally sent him, thinking, surely they will respect my son. But the tenant farmers said to one another, here comes the heir to this estate. Let's kill him and get the estate for ourselves. What did the political and religious rulers do when Jesus disrupted the temple? They planned to kill him. Jesus is telling them their own story. Jesus is literally, by way of story, telling them their own story. God prepared a place for you. You didn't recognize him in that place. He sent people to tell you about that place. You beat him up, killed him, threw him out. So he sent his son as his final effort to tell you. And what did you do? You did not receive him. You tried to kill him. Let's kill him and get the estate for ourselves. So they grabbed him and murdered him and threw his body out of the vineyard. Mark 12, 9-11. What do you suppose the owner of the vineyard will do? Jesus asked them. I'll tell you. He will come and kill those farmers and lease the vineyard to others. Didn't you ever read this in the scriptures? The stone that the builders rejected has now become the cornerstone. This is the Lord's doing, and it is wonderful to see. What did Jesus just say? He's telling them their own story. They know exactly where he's headed. And they ask the question, whose authority do you have to do these things? And he tells them plainly, I have the authority. They knew it. Mark 12, verse 12. The religious leaders wanted to arrest Jesus because they realized he was telling the story against them. They were the wicked farmers. But they were afraid of the crowd, so they left him and went away. How does it end in this scenario? Jesus says, you've got the wrong king. I haven't come to raise you up. I've come to give my life. You've got the wrong castle. I haven't come to rule from the building on top of the Mount of Olives. I have come to rule from your hearts, and you've got this all wrong. You want a king that's going to give you greater authority, but I have come because if you want to save your life, what did he say in Mark 8? You have to lose it. It's the inversion of the kingdom. He has to have the authority. We have to give him the authority. In other words, you can't have the king that you want ruling in the castle that you want, doing what you want him to do so that you can become greater and get what you want. That is not how the kingdom works. The kingdom works like this. We have a sacrificial king who gave his life, who broke down the temple that we worship so that we could become the temple and worship him. And in turn, we surrender our authority to him. And when we do, he saves us and satisfies us. That is how the kingdom works. And they wanted the exact opposite. I've got a 3-year-old running around my house right now who, this dude, he thinks he runs the ship. We've told ourselves this a number of times. Number 3 is going to be the easiest one. He is the bossiest one. He is the other day, he didn't want to eat his breakfast. We give him one of these little strawberry bars, and then we make him eggs and bacon. He's like, I don't want that. I want a strawberry bar. I want another strawberry bar. We're like, no, buddy, you have to eat your breakfast. And so he goes to me and he's like, Daddy, I want a strawberry bar. And I'm like, I'm sorry, you can't. You got to eat your breakfast. He goes to Anna and he says, Mama, spank Daddy. Daddy's being a bad boy. Daddy won't give me a strawberry bar. Anna looks at him and she's like, well, I'm sorry, buddy, but I can't give you a strawberry bar. You got to eat your breakfast. He marches over to me. Daddy, spank Mama. I'm like, okay, man, he said do it. Why not do it? Anna's like, Luke, knock it off, right? Stop. He says, spank Mama. She being bad girl. She won't give me strawberry bar. And I said, sorry, buddy, I told you, you got to eat your breakfast. So he grabs me by my pinky and he starts walking me somewhere. And he walks me over to my bedroom. He walks me into my bedroom. And then he steps out, wham, and slams the door. And he says, Mama, Daddy's in timeout. Daddy's being a bad boy. I was like, what in the world? So I open up the door. And I walk out and he says, you can't come out. You're in timeout. I leaned down, I looked at him and I said, watch me. Watch me come out. Why? Because he's got all the fire but no authority. He's got all the fire but no authority. Jesus is saying to the disciples, if you want to save your life, you have to lose it. What does that mean? That means you can't have an earthly king to rule from a castle, to overthrow everyone, to fix all of your problems so that you can become greater. You have to have a sacrificial king who dies for you, who destroys the temple of old and becomes the temple and lives among you and within you so that you become a temple so that you can surrender authority to him and live according to his will. Let's start where we began. We've taken the journey up. We have seen Jesus do everything that he has done. Now we must ask ourselves this question. Who is the king that we have? What is the castle that we have? And who has the authority in our life?